on the so-called crisis of masculinity. For years now, there has been talk of a, quote, crisis of masculinity, by which it is meant that there is less masculinity than, for example, during the 20th century. If there is less of something, perhaps that is because there is less need for it. Technological advances have made life much easier, above all in a physical sense, and also safer. Hence, there is less need for physical strength and for providing personal protection through some of the elements of masculinity. Because it is less needed, masculinity is also less valued in society. Because it is less valued, men are less inclined to acquire it and to express it. For this reason, complaints about the insufficient masculinity of today's men are misplaced. Men who, for example, spend a great deal of time working on their muscle mass often appear as people who are forcing a masculine impression. Far fewer men did this in the 1950s and 1960s, and yet most people would agree that men were more masculine then than in the current era. And why were they more masculine? Among other things, simply because living conditions were harsher, including physically harsher, and the entire world was poorer and more serious. Why did males, human individuals of the male sex that is, in earlier times in much greater numbers strive to grow up and become men? Because living conditions were harsher and therefore required masculine traits to a much greater extent as a condition for survival and a certain degree of prosperity, according to the conditions of that era. And because the rewards for reaching adulthood and masculinity were relatively much greater than in today's era. Masculinity, and by that I mean positive masculinity, is today an unattractive job, a job many males do not wish to do. The reason is the same as with other unattractive jobs, an unfavorable assessment of the benefits it brings relative to the effort and work invested. It is not easy to be masculine. It requires being composed and emotionally stable, which demands self-control, self-restraint, and resistance to momentary affects and impulses. That requires effort. It is easier to be capricious and impulsive. It is necessary to be fair. That requires weighing reasons for and against different opinions, positions, and actions. It is easier to take the side that first appears to be in our interest or aligned with dominant views. It is necessary to be practically wise. For more information on this, I refer the listener to Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. It is necessary to think critically. This requires a certain intellectual effort and the acquisition of knowledge. It is easier to accept the opinions of one's environment without critical distance. It is necessary to be competent in what one does. This requires effort invested in acquiring knowledge and skills. It is necessary to be persistent. This requires effort. Indeed, it is effort itself. It also requires tolerance for frustration. It is easier to give up after the first efforts and obstacles. It is necessary to remain grounded in reality and to stay there even in difficult periods rather than escaping into fantasy, idle dreams, and wishful thinking. Masculinity is, among other things, a psychological need of women when it comes to males. That need, however, is significantly less present today than in earlier eras. Why is this need less present than before? Because in the easier and safer conditions of contemporary human environments, masculine traits are less necessary. This may also explain the phenomenon of the increasing number of male transsexuals in countries of the political West. It is reasonable to assume that nature reduces the number of men in those human environments in which the need for them is diminished. The reduction in testosterone levels with each new generation over recent decades could be an effect of the decreasing physical burden of existence and the lower degree of danger in human environments in modern societies. It may be that nature regulates testosterone levels in male humans in accordance with environmental conditions. If this is true, then the degree of masculinity may increase if living conditions become more difficult. Indeed, the degree of masculinity today is higher in countries where living conditions are significantly harsher than in the comfortable Disneyland-like world of the West. In addition, for nearly 80 years, the West has not had a major war, by now actually 80 years and more, the West has not had a major war on its own territory, which, as regularly occurred throughout history, would have significantly reduced the number of men in the population. For maintaining the existing size of a population, as well as for increasing it after an abrupt reduction, for example due to war, famine, or a pandemic, far fewer males than females are required. This is also reflected in the fact that the main factor in demography is not the number of children per woman, but the number of daughters per woman. This is called the reproduction rate. Men who spend a great deal of time working on their muscle mass in order to impress women have not noticed or have not properly understood these changed environmental conditions. Observing that they are less in demand among women as men, they draw the incorrect conclusion that it is therefore necessary to augment themselves as men, at least externally, physically. This incorrect conclusion leads them largely to a waste of time and resources. The same applies to so-called looksmaxers, who for the same goal attempt to beautify themselves, not only within the limits of their natural appearance, but also through cosmetics and through plastic surgery.